Thank you, Audrey. And now for the invocation, Jim Morris.
You're welcome to pray in your faith. We are so grateful for this food. It restores our strength. It heals our bodies. It fuels our brains. We are so grateful for this time to renew our spirit, to share our trials, to find new strength. Please help those who call upon you in their time of need. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Jim. And now, visiting Rotarians and guests, Beth Hurley.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Columbia Rotary Club. Happy Monday. At this time, I would like all Rotarians who have guests to please introduce your guests one at a time. Libby's got the microphone and she'll walk it around.
Hello, I'm William Starrett, and this is Christina Segarra. She owns Forever Flowers, so if you've lost a loved one, she's the one to speak to about preserving their memory.
So if you need a loan on your house or refitting it or a construction loan, call Julia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Kennedy, and I brought with me my husband. Well, I didn't bring him, he came. So, my husband, Rick Kennedy, who is a private pilot and was very interested in our speaker today.
Hi, I'm Glenn Matthews with Modern Exterminating, and I have actually two guests with me today. The first is Nate Ellison. He's with the Ellison Group. They sell various kinds of insurance. He was just telling me about some health insurance stuff he's been doing. And I'd like to introduce my new boss and my wife, Melanie Matthews, and she started with the company last month.
Shaw, and let me just say Beth Dendorf needs no introduction to this club. She is a former member of our club, and she is currently the executive director of the Foundation for the Governor's School for Science and Mathematics, and she too is a pilot.
I'm Rusty Pass, and my guest today is Josh Ayers. He's Director of Sales for Southern Custom Doors and Hardware, and he is not a pilot.
I'm Jerry Pate, and we have with us two guests. Catherine, if you and Ron would please stand up. Catherine Cuddy is a longtime friend of mine. She is treasurer of SHAFE, that's the Aircraft Restoration Group that's part of our program today. And also with her is Ron Skipper, who is the restoration chairman. And you're going to hear about that, and we'll introduce our guest speaker in a little bit, but they're with you.
Do you have any visiting Rotarians? Okay. Thank you all for being here and have a great week.
Thank you, Beth. And now for health and happiness, Perry Orth.
How's everybody doing? Happy Monday. All right. I got health and happiness, and everybody was healthy and happy, which is great. We love that. So I thought it was perfect timing that I had health and happiness today because, as we all know, guess what Thursday is? August 1st, which means what? It's football season in South Carolina. But, so I'm going to give the football update today. Any Furman, Citadel, any of the lower FCS schools, I apologize. But today we're going to focus on Carolina and Clemson, so y'all just got to bear with me today. So, me being a former South Carolina quarterback, we're going to start with Gamecocks because I can't do it. I can't start with Clemson. Many of y'all may have heard, if not, a big story came out last night at about 10 o'clock that one of Clemson's running backs, if you're a Clemson football fan, you know his name, Tavian Feaster, just actually transferred to South Carolina and will be starting practice with them on Thursday, which is pretty big news. And I was talking with Hunter Wilson about 5 minutes ago, sitting there thinking, if I had one more year, I don't know, I don't think I could do it. I don't know if y'all could, being in-state, but thinking that I had one more year of eligibility and I was playing at South Carolina and go to Clemson. I don't know if I could do it, but I know he's a Spartanburg guy. He wanted to be in-state, wanted to be close to home. He's going to be a guy that is going to bring an instant boost to the run game for South Carolina, something they've struggled with over the last few years, and I think that they're going to need to get back to in a big way this fall if they want to have any success. Because if you're a South Carolina fan, even a Clemson fan, you've heard how difficult South Carolina's schedule is going to be this season. I mean, right now it's number 1 in the country. You're looking at, you got to play Clemson at Georgia and Alabama, at Texas A&M, Florida, at Tennessee, at Missouri. I mean, that's brutal. So some of you Clemson fans that don't know the South Carolina players, I'm going to highlight a few that I want to run by you. 2 of the wide receivers, Brian Edwards and Shi Smith, are 2 guys that I think are going to have a big year for the Gamecocks. And obviously now we're returning our 4th year starting quarterback Jake Bentley. And then Tavian Feaster is going to bring a new addition to the run game. So I think our offense will pick up right where, well, not exactly where they left off, maybe more towards like where they left off after the Clemson game of last year. Defensively, they've got 3 guys that were preseason All-SEC candidates. They got 2 defensive linemen, Javon Kinlaw, DJ Wanham, and a middle linebacker, TJ Brunson. Guys that have all played a lot of football and that are going to have a big year if South Carolina wants to get back bowl eligible, because that schedule is just, it's pretty difficult. But one name, before we hop to Clemson, that I want you guys to keep note of, you football fans in here, is number 7 on there. He's now number 1 on the defense. J.C. Horn plays cornerback. He is right now listed in the in a pre-draft for his class as the number 1 corner in his draft class, which means that he could be a top 15 overall pick, which is pretty interesting considering that he's only going into his sophomore year. Clemson's kind of hard to talk about. I mean, they are what they are. Right now they're the best in college football. As bad as I hate to say it and admit it. I mean, you look at their quarterback who's has a potential to win the Heisman Trophy in Trevor Lawrence. You got 2 All-American wide receivers. Tavian Feaster was one of the better running backs in the country, and he had to leave because he wasn't getting playing time. Because of Travis Etienne. For Clemson, they're going to have some questions that need answered on defense. They lost a lot. As we all know, their defensive line had 3 guys drafted in the first 40 picks or something like that. Anytime you have that, it can pose some issues, but as we know, Dabo Swinney and his staff can recruit like nobody's business, and so unfortunately, it's looking like them and Alabama will either end up in the playoff or the national title, unless we can knock them off November something in Williams-Brice, and I hope you guys are all there for it, but I think that's it. How many Clemson fans do we have in here, by the way? Is it a pretty even number? Oh, so we're a heavy guy. Are you visiting? No, I'm excited for football season. There's just nothing like tailgating at Clemson or Carolina games, or something about. I was walking around the stadium a couple weeks ago, getting a little jogging, getting some exercise, and you could just kind of feel it was coming. And as we all know in the South, we love football, and there's just something about it. And I know I'm excited, and I hope you guys are too. But I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm excited about football too now. Thank you. Okay, cart buckets. up here, but you've got one on your table, please give what you can each week. We need to increase our contribution to CART according to Rotary International, but we're doing a great job. Just remind you. Other announcements. One, still time to sign up for those committees. We're working on tabulating, selecting committees for people, but there's still time to sign up, and I think there should be sign-up sheets on your table. If not, there's some at the desk out front. So if you haven't already filled it out, please do. And in addition, which I think is really good news, we have confirmed a club social at the Lace House on December 16th. So mark your calendars. I have already spoken to our governor, and he plans to be there. So it ought to be a great, fun evening, and I'm hoping, he didn't commit to this, but I'm hoping that he will invite us back over to the governor's mansion. He can't host us there, but he could invite his friends over, and it'll be all decorated for Christmas. So anyway, it should be a great evening. I'm also looking for committee members to help plan it, and sponsors, of course. It is not listed on those sign-up sheets because we didn't have it confirmed at the time, but if that is something you'd like to do, just put it on one of the sheets or see me, and I'd really appreciate it. Okay. What else? Oh, the board. Just a reminder, we will meet right after this meeting in a room behind our meeting here. Now, we've got a few minutes before our speaker, so how about some time just to network with yourselves? And Cynthia, you can join another table if you'd like, but just for a few minutes, enjoy each other. Thanks. to announce in my announcements, our member, Kishore, raise your hand, Kishore. He's going to have knee surgery at the end of August and will need a ride to Rotary sometime after Labor Day. If any of you live in the Lake Carolina area and would be able to give him a ride, will you just see him maybe after the meeting? We would really appreciate it. And we'd love to have him, so I hope somebody can help him out. Okay, without further ado, introduce our speaker is Jerry Pate.
I saw a lot of hands go up. How about you stand if you've ever been involved in aviation or flown airplanes and stuff? Let's see how many people we got in the room. And somebody, I think David was talking about having flown one of the planes we're going to be talking about today. Our guests today are with the South Carolina Historic Aviation Foundation. It was formed 9 years ago to preserve South Carolina's very rich aviation history. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but during World War II, we had Army aviation bases almost all over the state. And down in Orangeburg, at that famous field down there, French aviators were taught how to fly by one guy that I know. He'd been my flight instructor, Hires Furtick, and he spoke fluent Orangeburgese. He didn't speak any French. And can you believe it or not, they taught using hand signals. And the primary aircraft down there was a Stearman. We're not going to talk about a Stearman today, we're going to talk about a bomber. At the center of Schaeff's work is a very rare B-25C Mitchell medium bomber. It was like one of the bombers that was trained out at Columbia Metro Airport. This plane 75 years ago took off from an Army air base in Greenville and ended up getting a little bit low over Lake Greenwood and plowed into the lake. The plane, which was recovered from the lake, is one of only a few known C models still in existence. Here to talk about the work of Schaeff, which they've been doing to restore this aircraft at Hamilton Owens Field for the last decade or so, is Ken Barry. He's president of Schaeff. He is the owner and operations manager of Barry's Freight. As a private pilot and aircraft owner, he shares a passion for preserving aviation history. But what these folks have done, you'll see in the pictures, has just been something sort of miraculous in their restoration work. Ken, come on up and tell us.
Thank you, Jerry. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Let me get organized. Anyway, again, thanks for having us here today. You guys have a great organization, and the stuff you guys do around the world is well known. You know, stamping out polio and water purification, just to name a few. And we're really pleased to be here today to tell us about some of the things we're doing right here at Owens Field. As Jerry said, in 2011, our organization got founded, and we're actually a 501c. And the reason we came about was, Lake Murray was also used for aerial bombing practice during World War II. And there were about 3 B-25s in that lake. And the B-25 that came out of that lake is kind of a famous Nova show about it. You can watch it up. It went down to Alabama. And when the plane came out of Greenwood, it languished a couple of years at the airport up there. And went from here and there trying to find funding and places to be. And the group that had it was thinking about selling it. And so they actually did put it on the internet for sale. And about 8 to 10 folks around here were very concerned that the airplane, with its rich history, local, would leave the state like the other one did. So they pulled some money together and purchased the airplane. And it went to the Curtis Wright hangar over there, which you guys probably have noticed has been redone. It is a very popular business now with the hunter-gatherer brewery in there. But it sat there for years. And the group just got together just to save that plane. And then they were like, well, what are we going to do with it? So it sat in the building for several years. Me and a friend of mine, Canson Foster, got involved and went down to a B-25 flight training thing at a museum in Texas and saw what they were doing and thought, you know, we can do this in Columbia, South Carolina. So we, over at Owens Field, we got one of the large hangars over there. We were able to work it out and keep both our planes in there and bring the B-25 up, get it out of the weather. Because at that point, Curtiss Wright had no roof, and so the plane was continuously wet and just further eroding. Anyway, we got it out of there, got a little workshop going, and went to a couple different events, started promoting the airplane, trying to get funding for this and that. Before you know it, we've got a living museum going on over there. And we've been attracting attention of a lot of really skilled and talented volunteers, two of which are right here today. Please take a second and speak to them. We've got a little table set up over there with some of their handiwork and some of the cool historical items that we have. But what we're trying to do is basically save this airplane, plus many more, and we're trying to get young people, especially underprivileged young people, through the airport fence. We're trying to get them in, not just learn about be a pilot, or a mechanic, or a flight attendant, or whatever, just the STEM stuff. Just to get them interested in history and science. We do a lot of groups of young people, and in every group, you know, of 20 or 30 kids, there'll be several that just ask a lot more questions. There'll be, you know, you can just see them. And, you know, those kids, a lot of times, they're right by the airport, they can't get in, they go like, oh, look at that, just like me when I was a kid. Actually, I grew up on an airport, I really can't use me, but, you know, you always wanted to get closer and wanted to talk to people. That's what we try to do over there. And then as far as the adults go, we try to get people involved. So anyone wants to come out on Mondays or Thursdays from 5 to 9 and see what we're doing, we'll be glad to have you. And we will get you set up to something that you will enjoy and teach you some new stuff pretty quick. But I'm going to put my glasses on here. Anyway, the B-25 we want to talk about for a second. You know, on D-Day in 1944, when the plane went in the lake, it's kind of an interesting story. One of the gentlemen, there were three 19-year-old cadets in there, and one of them was plus an instructor. And the one sitting in the pilot seat was a 19-year-old guy named Dan Rossman. And they were rotating, with the instructor in the right seat, doing multi-engine work over in rural Greenwood County. Well, the instructor said, hey, it was Dan's turn to fly. He was sitting over there, and he said, hey, go down over the lake, and I'll get really low, and we'll show what you do if a Japanese fighter gets after you. Because at that point in the war, we already had D-Day. These guys, but the war in the Pacific front was really still raging, so they knew they were destined to go to fight the Japanese. So he goes, go down and fly really low over the water, and we'll show what you do to get rid of a Japanese Zero. So Dan goes and he's flying low and he's thinking like, I'm doing good. And the instructor says, no, lower than that, give me the plane. So the instructor's flying and he got so low, the last thing Dan remembers, and the reason why I can quote Dan is because up until 2014, he was in our group. And he was a delight. He was just a John Wayne kind of light kind of guy, but you had to pull this stuff out of him. He wasn't a bragging man at all. But he said he's looking out the window and he sees a guy standing up in a boat fishing. And he thought, that guy's head is the same height above the water as mine. And he thought, like, this guy is good. Like thinking about the instructor, you know. And the next thing, boom, one of the propellers hits the water, and it's really bad scene then. They had to pull the power, ditch the airplane. All of them got cut up pretty good, facially and chest. They all had their seatbelts on. They all climbed out. Two swam to a little island, two swam to the main shore. They were rescued, the plane sank. Some farmers saw it and called Columbia Army Air Base. Eventually a truck got up there with an ambulance. They collected the airmen and the whatever else. The plane just sunk. It's the middle of a war. They really didn't, you know, they were making you've heard of the Rosie Riveters, they were making these B-25s. One every shift at that time. So every 12 hours, boom, you had a B-25. So if it lost a B-25, it wasn't a big deal. So it's at the bottom of the lake, you went back. The Army Army Air Corps actually fined all 3 of the cadets $75. And they didn't do anything, but from what I've learned in the military, if you lose an aircraft, somebody's going to pay. You know, somebody's going to be blamed, and so that they held true to that. And Dan said that it was going to go on his record, even though his hands were off of the controls. But he said it never did go on his record, and they never had forced him to pay the fine. And he went on and became a pretty famous aviator. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories about Dan, and promise not to ramble, but pretty good stories. He, after he finished his training here at Columbia, he went on to a few other bases. He became a B-25 captain. And so he wound up down at the base in Savannah, where they gave him a brand new set of Ray-Bans, brand new leather jacket, a brand new B-25, and he picked a crew. And he was about 21 years old. You think about 21 years old and, you know, having that responsibility. And they said, all right, Dan, you need to take this airplane to San Francisco. And he's like, really? And he got with his navigator and he said, you do this? He goes, I think so. I just got out of school myself, and I don't know how to get out there. So they made it up to San Francisco, got to the base, and got acclimated to the area. And before the guy came in and said, hey, you guys are going to Hawaii. And they went, oh, well, this is it. We're going to Hawaii. We're going to go on to, you know, Japan and all the islands over there, all the fighting's going on. So they were in a group of a bunch of B-25s that were going across to Hawaii. And at the last minute after the briefing, they said the base commander came in and said, hey, I have one last thing, guys, and it's my pet peeve here. He goes, if anyone thinks you're going off to war, you might get killed and all this stuff, that it's okay to fly under the Golden Gate Bridge on the way out, it's not. He goes, we have a guy, he goes, I have a guy, he sits on the bridge of binoculars. If you fly under it, he'll get your number, I will call you back, and you'll be cleaning hangars the rest of the war. He goes, so don't do it. Apparently it was a thing that a couple people had tried. But Dan and those guys are worried about flying to Hawaii, you know, with 2 engines over all that water, without, you know, modern GPS like we have nowadays, you know. I mean, it was dead reckoning, you know, celestial navigation, charts and stuff, you know, Amelia Earhart kind of stuff, you know. And so, anyway, in the briefing, they came in and the guy goes, hey guys, you guys need to quit worrying about the whole overwater flight to Hawaii. The Navy's working with us, and they're going to place 2 ships, one here and one here. So with radio beacons, just turn your radio direction finder to that beacon and just fly right to that ship. And once you get to that one, fly to the next ship. And after that, you can pick up the one in Honolulu. And Dan said he thought, oh, well, that's pretty easy. You know, they've got it all figured out. Well, when it came down to the flight, neither one of those ships were there. Neither one. And he said when they finally got, he said they sweated it down to 20 minutes of fuel before they got into Honolulu, thinking like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of gas in the middle of the ocean, and none of them come look for us. But he made it there, and the Navy, some kind of screw up, and they never got the ship set up, but they got there. Anyway, and last Dan Rossman's story, he ends up in, I think, New Guinea, and on a small strip. You've probably seen where they would have a jungle island, and they would have a strip made out of the metal PFP planking. And he landed there, and he remember thinking, I've just flown this B-25 around the world, you know, at that young of an age. And he said he got out of the plane, and he walked up, you know, with his leather jacket on, and saw one of the mechanics and said, hey, he goes, we're a new crew here, where do we go? And he goes, go down and see the commanding officer. The other end of the field is about 2 miles down that way. And Dan said, well, how do I get there? He goes, well, you just take one of those Jeeps and just bring it back. And Dan said at that point he had to say, I don't know how to drive. Because, like Dan had said, you know, he grew up during the Depression, and only very few people had cars. And his whole military career, he'd been taken somewhere in a bus or a truck. And here he was, a young man that could handle one of the most sophisticated aircraft at that time, all around the world. And also, taxiing a B-25 today is still hard. If you go to a big air show or flying with that B-25s, you watch the B-25s. It was one of the first large airplanes with a freewheeling tricycle nose cube. You look at the B-17s and other things, they're all tail draggers. Well, you've got to know what you're doing. If you see B-25 and it's going like jerky, move it around, you can go, that's a new B-25 pilot. And it takes a while to get it, and he couldn't drive. Anyway, he said he got a mechanic to show him how to work the clutch and work the gears. And he said he kind of jumped and drove it down the other end, and he did put the Jeep back. But yeah, he was a great guy, and we had him until 2014. He would come down, him and his wife Sylvia lived in Roswell, Georgia. And we would go pick him up and bring him for certain events. And everybody loved having him there. His family, his daughter, her children are still involved in our group. They send us artifacts. Just matter of fact, a couple days ago, we had some pictures from them. And just a greatest generation kind of person. But anyway, we have some other aircraft too. We have a Yale. We've been fortunate to get an association with the Canadian Warbird Heritage Museum, which is a fascinating museum with a lot of amazing aircraft. And they called us up a couple months ago. We had been up there. Some of our crew have been up there, helped do this and that, and I've been up several times, and it's a fascinating place. And they said, hey, you guys want a Yale? Coming up on Saturday night. And I'm like, well, how much? He goes, no, we're going to get him one. You know, we got two. A Yale, if you guys are familiar with like a T6 maybe, T6 Texan, the big single engine, primary intermediate trainer from World War II. I'm sure you've seen him. Looks like a fighter plane if you thought. Anyway, so they did give us one. And we went up and picked it up. We've got it over in the hangar now. And me and Ron Skipper drove up and picked it up on a trailer, and that was quite an adventure. And brought it all the way back to Columbia, South Carolina. We had to take the wings off, and now it's got to go back. We are switching it out with another Yale they have, and that's our newest thing. But come over and check out the Yale. The cool thing about the Yale is it was made by the same company who made our B-25, like American Aviation. And early in the war, the French needed a heavy trainer, intermediate type trainer. North American was going to build it for them, build about 250 airplanes. Well, they built about 125, took the wings off, put them in crates, and they had them on a couple ships. Well, they sent them over to France, and sent a couple guys from North American to help them get them reassembled and all that. And guess who showed up? The Germans. The Germans took over France, and they also captured the entire fleet. So the Germans took the planes, took all the markings off, put German markings on, wrote their own flight manual, their own maintenance manual, and they used the airplanes against us during the war. They had 125 so that's a cool factoid about the Yale we have over there. We have a couple of airplanes at a different hangar down at Hilliard Airport, and several other that are promised to us once we get a larger building. Like I said earlier, this thing has just kind of evolved into a living museum. We get transient airplanes that come in sometimes and park on the ramp, and we'll have a special occasion. We've had hangar parties, and 1940s hangar parties with big bands and World War II searchlights. We try to make it fun. We try to make a museum that's not, when you think museum, you think, a bunch of old stuff, you see it. Well, no, we try to make all of our stuff work. And we get the children interested in it, and the adults too. We like to come up with, for example, we've got you guys have heard of the Norden bomb sight. It was the second most expensive and second most secret thing of World War II. We've got one over there. And in the Norden bomb sight, the precision was so much on it that every Norden bomb sight made for 8 years, the crosshairs come from the same blonde woman. There was a woman during the war who donated her hair for the war effort, and her hair were crosshairs. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And we have a lot of veterans show up from Vietnam, from World War II, Korea, who talk about all this how aviation influenced our lives. We have airline captains show up, mechanics. We had such a nice lady who was a flight attendant for 30 years, and talking about the golden days of air travel back in, with first class meals and linen tablecloths and all this. And, it's just, I've always really enjoyed aviation, and a lot of people are curious about it. And We're just trying to make a place where people can find out more, especially children. Feel free to come by our open house. We have an open house the second Saturday of every month. And we also have special occasion events too. And you know, I completely forgot about my slide thing here. I get rolling on this aviation stuff. Let's go through some slides here. We've got, what, 5 minutes left? No, we've got 10 minutes left. And somebody a while ago was talking about Clemson. And so I know we have like 2 people for Clemson in there, I think. I'm just kidding. No, this is actually a Clemson cadet at the turn of the century. They had an aeronautical school over there. Right, Catherine? Catherine is a big Clemson person. And we had this picture, we thought it was kind of cool. What you just said is 1903 or?
1911.
1911. So that's pretty early. This is over here at Owens Field. And before Owens Field, we'll talk about another guy. There's a guy named Paul Redford. A lot of folks think this was the first airport at Columbia. It actually wasn't. You know where Dreher High School is currently? That was the first airport in Columbia. And the gentleman by the name of Paul Redford set it up. He was kind of famous because he was right during the era of Charles Lindbergh and those guys. He had set several world records flying in the Caribbean and all over the world nonstop. He actually was trying to make a nonstop flight from Brunswick, Georgia, down to, I think, Buenos Aires. And he disappeared in the jungle somewhere. And it's a whole big mystery and story. We actually have a Paul Redford Society in Columbia that one of our members heads up, and they meet every year and talk about it, because there's still a lot of people who went down to try to find him also disappeared. But you know, the Amazon there was very, very dangerous during that period of time. And he was never seen, but his airport was right on the scene of Dreher High School. Well, this is the Curtiss Wright hangar, and if you look, the runway now, back then went right to the right of the building. Now it's in front right here, but at that point it went right through there, right through Memorial Stadium where the original runway used to be. And you know, when it says Curtiss Wright, it's because Glenn Curtiss Aircraft Corporation, and the Wright brothers, back in the early days of aviation, had bitter battles. And they were slinging each other like crazy. Matter of fact, the one Wright brother died early, and the other brother blamed Glenn Curtiss for the constant lawsuits for worrying him all the time for his brother's early death. Eventually, they merged and became the Curtiss Wright Aircraft Corporation. And they said, you know, to get these planes around the country, train people, we've got to come up with almost like a dealership type of idea. So they built a series of these hangars all around the country. There's only a few left. Luckily, Columbia has still got ours. Luckily, a couple of years ago, it got rebuilt, and it's really nice. If you haven't been there, please go check it out. You'll enjoy yourself. Amelia Earhart's been in that building. A lot of famous, FDR, we were talking earlier, has been in that building. A lot of famous folks have been through that building. But anyway, we'll go through, there's a bunch of other shots. You can see the Curtiss Wright in the background there. There's that picture I actually know was a day they had a fly-in air race type thing in Columbia. And back in those days, in the 30s, they called the golden age of silver age of aviation. People like Jimmy Doodle, all those were air race champions. They were just as big as baseball stars. It was a big deal. The whole city turned out. There's another picture actually bigger than this. You can see there's thousands of cars parked all around the airport. Another Owensfield picture. This is actually when Amelia Earhart came through Owensfield. That behind her was a new thing called a Picarin autogyro, which is basically half gyrocopter, half airplane. She was very famous, and so they were trying to sell this thing. So they got her to fly around the country and do like a celebrity, you know, give people rides, try to sell the airplane. It was also sponsored by Beech Nut Chewing Gum, and the folks weren't standing there. You could see it says, other pictures, it says Beech Nut on the side of the airplane. And, oh, there it is, the one right there where it says Beech Nut. But the log book, I think it's a picture, yeah, here's a log book that's in possession of USC right now, where she stopped in. There was like a visitor's log for Owens Field. Columbia Army Air Base over here. Like I said, my family has been in the air freight and trucking business for almost 50 years, and so I grew up at this airport. And in the 60s and 70s, you know, a lot of stuff was still there, and a lot of the current employees were former Army Air Corps or Air Force. So I grew up playing around all this stuff. Maybe that's one of the parts where I've just been so fascinated with it. This is the flight line at Columbia Army Air Base during World War II. And the B-25 we had could be one of those ones on the right. We can't see the number. We don't know. We know when ours got there. You folks probably heard of Jimmy Doolittle and the raid. Well, Jimmy Doolittle trained secretly here at Columbia Army Air Base. Didn't use our plane, but they trained here for several months and went down to Florida and finished up the training before going on the famous raid. This is Lake Murray, and you can see them doing some artillery practice there. The air base, the Columbia Army Air Base, actually kept 4 or 5 patrol boats on the lake in case anybody ever crashed in the lake. There's a guy loading some dummy practice bombs. There's a guy with some practice bombs. We've got one of those bombs over at the hangar. They were filled with 100 pounds of wet sand. That's a B-25 that cracked up. Where was that at? I can't remember.
Here,
At Columbia Army, yeah. Almost 300 people were killed at Columbia Metro, which was Columbia Army Air Base at that point. Radar was very, very crude at that point. Most things were done with binoculars, flags, lights, and there was also a lady who was moving one of the aircraft was killed. They had a lot of accidents basically on the ground taxiing and just running into each other because the skies were just full of airplanes, and they were all a bunch of brand new pilots. These are pictures of bases all around the state, and from what I heard the other day, South Carolina has had more bases than any other state. As far as when it came to aviation, we've got pretty good weather all year round for flying. So that was one of the good choices. And pretty flat land. Those are also different bases. Now that's down at Camden, which Camden, that building is still there. That building was used in World War II. They had a primary training base down there. And they would, when guys would first go in, they would start their training at Camden. That's actually up at what's now called Donaldson Center. At that point, it was called Greenville Army Air Base. That's where GF-2 RB-25 took off from. And this picture here, I'm pretty sure, is one of Jan Rossman's graduation pictures. I remember him at one point showing me this picture a long time ago. This is at Greenville Army Air Base, correct? Yes. And Pete Tate, I can't remember the story on him. Do you know that, Kathy? No? Okay. Just a person who was up at Greenville Army Air Base. That's a B-25. We've got memorial plaques over at the Columbia Army Air Base, where Metro, you'll see them when you go in flying. The 345th Bomber Group was based over there during the war. This talks about Doolittle Raid coming off the aircraft carrier, but most of you folks have seen the movies or heard about it. Pretty amazing thing that happened right at the beginning of World War II. You know, after we were surprisingly bombed by the Japanese, American morale was at a very low point. And so when out of nowhere, these guys showed up and bombed Tokyo, the Japanese were just overwhelmed. They couldn't believe it. This was way before the days of air refueling and all this stuff. And it just, I mean, everybody in America did like a yes, you know. It really got a lot of people turning out, signing up, buying more bonds, all this kind of stuff. Jimmy Doolittle, who went on the mission himself, you know, they tried to keep him from going, but he wanted to go. He said, I'm not going to send these men to their death. I'm going to get them all hooked up with this and then not go. He made it over to China, one of the few planes that actually made it to China, and he thought he was going to be court-martialed because most of the planes didn't get to where. From the beginning, the mission was a iffy at best if it was going to work out, and then they were spotted earlier by a Japanese spy fishing boat, and they had said it departed. So fuel was the main concern. Most of them ran out of fuel before they got to the Chinese mainland. But I won't go into a whole bunch of depth on that, but it was an amazing thing. Also, we worked with the Tuskegee Airmen. They have several events we have with them. A lot of these guys train right in Walterboro, South Carolina. If you go to Walterboro to the airport there, you'll see a bunch of plaques. And they also had a unit that operated B-25s. All their airplanes had the red tail. This is Dan Rossman in 1943 in a primary trainer. That's the kind of plane that was used at Camden, which you saw earlier. That's Dan, probably, I don't know, a couple of years before he died. This is, isn't this the Lake Murray?
No, this is us.
Okay, I was thinking that some of the people were saying, but this is the one coming out of Lake Murray.
No, this is us.
Oh, it is ours. I thought it was. Okay. You can see it. How they took those 55-gallon drums and inflated them with air and got it up. It was on the trailer coming over to the airport in Greenwood. And that's the way the inside looked when we got it. That's the way it looks now. The instrument panel was completely built. Everything in there is original parts or either fabricated parts from the manuals. And I know we're going to have to stop here in about 3 minutes, correct? Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here and show some cool pictures of some of the work being done. This is the Yale I was speaking about earlier, the one that the Germans captured in France. Is that it?
Yep.
Yep, that's it. Anyway, folks, I know we've got to end up here in about 2 minutes, but please come by and see us. If anyone who wants to get involved, we'd love to have you. The second Saturday of every month, we have got an open house from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and then Monday and Friday. Yes, sir.
Have y'all been involved with the Salute of the Coast, fly along the coast during 4th of July?
You know, we have not yet. I wanted to do that, but I mean, it's a great event. We have not done anything with that yet. No, have not. Yes, sir.
What distinguishes the Model C or the B-25C from the earlier versions?
Well, there's not as many machine guns is one of the things. Also, the J model has got some blisters on each side. Don't let me run over. Just tell me when it starts. Okay. It's got some machine guns on each side. It has one has 2 turrets, right? I'm trying to think of all the things. There's like 4 different models after the C. The C was a very early model, made in the 39 and 40 and 41. But they were out. There was the J, there was the D. There was a bunch of different models for different roles. Thank you.
That was fascinating, and thank you so much history. Whoever would have thought? So we appreciate you sharing with us, and this is a token of our appreciation for sharing. And President-elect Mason, you got time to tell us next week?
Next week, we have a new speaker that we've never had before. We have Craig Curry. He's the CEO and president of Transitions, which is also the Midlands Housing Alliance. Coming to talk about what they do there. We've never had one of these.
Thank you all. And now let's close in song, and you all have a great